everyone, this is Isaac White from the Crockett Tavern Museum here in Morristown, Tennessee. And today we are going to be finishing up on the final chapter of Crockett's life and adventures. For those of you who have been following along on Facebook and YouTube, you know that we discussed his birth, as well as his childhood and some of the adventures that befell him in that time, as well as his love scrapes, and of course his terms in the Creek Indian War, as well as commerce. But now we're moving forward because in 1835, Crockett had lost his last bid to re-election to Adam Huntsman in that very same year. And now, feeling disillusioned with the United States and, of course, the state of Tennessee, Crockett feels that it's much more fitting to move elsewhere to start afresh. And he had heard previously about lands that he could easily get a hold of from Sam Houston in Texas. Also, Crockett had stated on a number of occasions that he would much prefer to live under Mexican rule as opposed to the rule of Martin Van Buren. And so, even without Martin Van Buren being elected, Crockett knew that the writing was on the wall. Van Buren was possibly going to get elected to presidency the next term, so he decides to bite the bullet and head to Texas. But before he does so, he hosts a big barbecue and a barn dance, and everyone, friends and family, they turn out from miles around to celebrate. But on November 1st, 1835, David Crockett had officially gone to Texas. Now, before he leaves, his youngest daughter Matilda recounts very vividly the last few moments that she saw her father as he was heading for Texas. She says that he was wearing a fine hunting suit, wearing a coonskin cap, and carrying a fine rifle. Now, in her recollection in 1892, the last interview that was done with her, she also states that her father intended to head on down there to join the Texan army. But the fact of the matter is, nothing could have been further from the truth, because Crockett was not interested in serving in the army. Land, not heroism, was on his mind as he made his way further south with his companions, until finally he arrived at McCool's Tavern in Memphis, Tennessee. While he was there, he treated the house to a few rounds, and then ended up giving what would be one of his most famous speeches, in which he concluded, more or less, by saying that, "Since you all have seen fit to elect a man with a timber toe to succeed me, you may all go to hell, and I will go to Texas." A phrase, of course, that was oft repeated as he wended his way down southwards. Now, as he started getting closer and closer to Texas, every town that he passed through wanted to turn out in great numbers to see this famed frontiersman. And in fact, it was at Little Rock that Crockett cemented his fame because, as some of the sources state, he showed off his skill in a rifle shooting competition, wherein with both his first and second shots, he was able to place the bullet one on top of the other. So with all the carousing and carrying on that was going on as he was making his way to Texas, Crockett was easily one of the most recognizable men in the land by the time he makes his way across the Red River in early December of 1835 at the Jonesboro Crossing. Once he gets down into Texas, he stays for some time with a fellow Kentucky native, Ben Stiles, who then takes him over to the home of William Becknell, who encourages him to stay along for a few days in order that they might take in a buffalo hunt. Well, while they were scouting out the land and hunting, Crockett was pleased with what he saw, the bounty of the land and all of its fruits. And in one of his last letters, he states that this was the garden spot of the world. And there's a very good possibility that he might have wanted to go ahead and build a cabin on said land to bring out his wife and children and start life all over again. But whatever the case, he could not stay very long in these lands because he had to continue moving on southwards if he was going to get the citizenship which he needed in order to get that land. But of course, as we'll see, this takes him on a whole different path, one that he did not plan when he left Tennessee for Texas. And we'll discuss that in our next video.